What happens when you have gods clashing, vigilantes rising, and legends going to war? You get some of the most jaw-dropping fight scenes from the world of comic book movies. So on that note, let me show you some of them with the top 30 fight scenes in DC movies.
You want blood? Come get it!
It took around 5 years, but Black Manta finally gets his rematch here against Aquaman. Sure, trying to go for his kid was a bit too extreme, but Arthur Curry ain't having none of that in his own movie. What's surprising though is that Black Manta gains the upper hand despite Aquaman dominating the fight for the most part. This confusing switcheroo is mainly why this comes in at 30, because the fight moves on display are pretty cool and intense. The choreography was executed flawlessly, as you can notice that this is one long camera shot where you can see all the action clearly. It's paced well and controlled even better. This sequence is a great example of how you should do trident combat, but it's a real shame we don't get more of this in the future. Well, at least not how it was originally planned.
But you're only half the man he was. How pathetic.
Hi, boys. Meeting's over.
If you want to see a diva pull off a badass sequence, you can leave it to Harley Quinn to get the job done. Birds of Prey may have fallen flat as a movie, but that takes nothing away from Margot Robbie, who continues to show us why she's such a versatile actress. The battle in the police station sees Harley Quinn showing us some of her most colourful moves in highly stylized fashion. There are theories stating that the colours and the glitter are all in her head and she's actually firing bullets, but we'll just leave the interpretation to each individual's perception, okay? The reason this scene gets so much love is because Harley doesn't rely on forced raw power, which never looks believable no matter how accommodating your stuntmen are. She focuses on her agility and gymnastic abilities to take out everyone in her way. Well, okay, she does do it with some of the cops and prisoners, but it's not as much as other movies, and it gets balanced out quite well with the slow motion sequencing and stuff. So yeah, overall, super solid sequence. We all knew it was going to be a matter of time before Peacemaker showed his true colours, but at least we also got a crazy combat sequence out of it too. And by true colours here, I meant his passion for violence, which he justifies as a means to peace. It's weird, I know, but that's what happens when you give a movie to James Gunn. Anyway, the fight between Peacemaker and Rick Flag looked almost as if it was straight out of a martial arts movie. They weren't fighting to have either side survive, and the gore factor enhanced the stakes of it even further. Of course, it all sadly came to an end for Flag, who was a pretty cool character overall, but unfortunately, he didn't have a whole show named after him. I did like how they made a Mortal Kombat type shot showing Rick Flag's heart being pierced, just to make absolutely sure we knew that yes, they're not messing around, he's dead for real. You know how they always say that beating yourself is the biggest victory? Well, it may be metaphorical in its intent, but Superman chose to give us a very literal and visual representation of it. Superman 3 doesn't have much to be remembered for, to be honest, but it did have Clark Kent facing off against once an evil version of his Superman alter ego. It's a very strange fight, so I beg you, please don't ask me to explain why this happened. However, the fight in itself was quite entertaining, because it was like we were watching the two sides of the Man of Steel competing against each other, even though one of them was clearly evil. All's well that ends well though, as our boy Clark does emerge victorious and even flexes his S sign to the audience to let us know that we are so back. In another somewhat confusing sequence, we see Robert Pattinson activating Turbo Rage Mode because of all the eyeliner jokes the TV Regent has been cracking of late. On a more serious note, what the heck is that green serum even supposed to be? Are we supposed to just randomly accept the bro's roaming around with some super adrenaline in his pocket? Anyway, the final battle was thrilling enough as it was, with a lot of acrobatics on display from both Batman as well as Catwoman. Then Bruce had to show us why he's such an edgy character, so he pulled out the magic juice and turned into the Hulk, but only from an attitude perspective. Plus, his girl was in danger at that very moment, so he had to pull out the Giga Chad card, right? Whether it's in the world of wrestling or the world of movies, The Rock does farm some crazy aura. He reached the heights of his solo leveling phase when he became Black Adam and took down a bunch of humans with weak magic. I mean, weapons. Bro's totally shown as an elite, being comparable to a god, especially by the way he's being presented and staged throughout the scene. My highlight still remains that poor dude getting fried to the bone in PG-13 fashion, because this is the kind of stuff that sticks with you. Also, I know this is technically supposed to be a fight, but the word by definition implies that both sides have a chance of winning. From the way Black Adam was going, I don't think those dudes even had the slightest opportunity to do any damage to him.
Familiar, don't you have anything new? How about this?
Oh yeah, I always love those sequences that show us when the student has become the master. Ra's al Ghul may be a forgotten villain in comparison to the Joker, but he did help kick things off for the Dark Knight trilogy and did a fabulous job of it as well. The final battle between him and Batman in the train was an appropriate way to end the film, because the relationship that started with discipline and faith ended with chaos and abandonment. Also, here's a fun fact for you. Liam Neeson doesn't really like comic book movies, but the main reason he chose to do Batman Begins was because Christopher Nolan's presentation of the story made it seem very noir. Plus, the cast was pretty epic, so passing on that would have definitely been a big mistake. We've seen tons of Superman content, but for this one entry, let's have Supergirl give it a go. Not to sound a certain way about anything, but unlike Henry Cavill's Superman, she fails against Zod and ends up losing her life in this battle. Of course, there are many other factors to be sad about this, such as a twisted plot and an unnecessary repetition of a villain who's already done his bit. However, the fight was pretty freaking intense while it lasted. Supergirl gave it her all after learning that Kal-El doesn't make it in this universe, and we got to see the two Flashes showing off their own skills in the middle of all the chaos. Also, Zod had to rely on a sneak attack to win, which isn't exactly an honorable way to claim victory. Ever thought you'd see a kid take down a dragon? Well, it happens in this film, although said kid also happens to be in the body of an overpowered superhero. Billy Batson isn't to be taken lightly, because it's his spirit and determination that allow him to triumph over both Calypso and Ladon. The punches were solid, but the key takeaway was Bro pushing himself through that fire blast and taking down two birds with one stone, or should I say, spear. This may have been a comedy film, but it still takes a lot of willpower to be able to pull off something so amazing. Maybe Rachel Ziegler told Shazam about how she was going to play Snow White, and that was enough for Bro to try and sacrifice himself without any hesitation. You can always count on Batman to be fighting in some real darkness. The cathedral scene from the OG flick had Bruce Wayne fighting all of Joker's goons and winning quite easily too, till he faced off against a dude who can surely be considered as a final boss. This man had great skill and was the only opponent who gave Batman a run for his money. The overall fight was great, and I loved how in the middle of all of this, the Joker just kept dancing away with a very spooked out Vic. It's definitely on brand, especially considering this is the Jack Nicholson Joker who'd set some really high standards that Heath Ledger eventually met, and at times even exceeded. Now, here's some trivia. The actor who played the strongman goon here was one of Denzel Washington's stunt doubles in 1991's Ricochet, and also Wesley Snipes in Demolition Man.
Kill him.
V will always be a legend because bro could see what was coming for both parties whenever he engaged in a battle. Take this one for instance. He never got into this encounter thinking he was going to make it out alive, which is why he took in all those bullets in such a badass manner.
My turn.
However, he also made sure that Mr. Creedy would get the word late added to his name. Concerning the fight, we not only get to see some crazy knife and slashing skills, but we also get some awesome lines from V before he makes his prediction on killing Creedy come true. Now, look. I know that V for Vendetta wasn't technically created by DC Comics, but it was published under their Vertigo imprint. Basically, I just needed a reason to put this entry on the list, okay? Supergirl may not have succeeded, but before we move on to an entry I'm sure you're expecting to see at some point, let's first look at Kal-El's first battle against Zod, which happens in Superman 2. This fight's definitely more upbeat and entertaining.
Hold him!
Because that's what people liked back in the 80s, and to be honest with you, I don't mind it. There's still a decent exchange of blows, with both opponents getting their fair share of hits, but what's important is that even in the midst of the fight, the Man of Steel is still concerned about the people in the area. What remains etched in my memory though, is when bro tosses Zod into a freaking Coca-Cola advertisement. I'm sure the company paid to be featured in the movie, but I never thought they'd be fine with the villain literally crashing into their billboard.
So you came back to die with your city?
I came back to stop you.
It's only fitting to see Batman triumph in the middle of chaos. You could say that this was his revenge fight against Bane, and he passes with flying colours this time because he's got a lot more clarity in his head. They're also fighting in broad daylight, which is a stark contrast to their earlier encounter. Nevertheless, it's an enjoyable and highly satisfying sequence. Because all of us are hoping for the rematch to happen exactly as it did. They're not the only two folks having a go at each other here either, which makes the sequence feel larger than life. Unfortunately, we can't really enjoy this victory too much because we learn soon after that Bane was just a simp on steroids. In another encounter involving Kryptonians, we see Superman taking on Zod's minions. Using that term doesn't actually sound right though, does it? Because both Namek and Faora Ul were both able to stand their ground against Superman until the writers finally decided to strengthen him to a more believable level. The punches did feel hardcore, and the visual direction was a nice way to introduce the masses to Zack Snyder's stylistic choices. There's a lot of CGI and destruction involved, with some human intervention too. But the moment Superman gets the hang of it, he's able to counter both his opponents, although the fight doesn't reach a definitive conclusion from his end until he takes on their boss.
It is that evolution always wins.
Ahora sí, cabrón!
Who would have thought that the OG Suicide Squad would find its way into this list with a short but fiery battle? It's Incubus versus El Diablo, who transforms and surprises everyone with how powerful he actually is. The problem was obviously that he couldn't last too long in this form, but for whatever time he had his flame on, he was a force to be reckoned with. I mean, if El Diablo could maintain his form for another 20 seconds or so,
The chingaste, güey.
he would have probably been able to deep fry Incubus without any additional support. Also, did you know that he's played by Jay Hernandez? Yeah, he's the same dude who was in Hostel. Surprise, surprise, John Constantine doesn't like bugs. Well, the actual surprise to most general fans is that he's a legit DC character, and that's good news because we can now enjoy Keanu Reeves smashing a demon bug monster. Well, it's actually a dude driving a van who does the finishing duty, so I hope he's got some good quality windshield wipers because he's gonna need them. The fight between Constantine and this monster comes and goes in a flash, so there's not much to talk about there, but it's still a cool encounter, and I personally preferred it to the one against Gabriel.
Should have minded your own business, exorcist.
Peace has cost you your strength. Victory has defeated you.
We already covered the rematch, but seeing the Dark Knight getting violated was easily a much more impactful moment than seeing him win. The fight against Bane wasn't something he'd planned for, but even then, Bruce Wayne was confident that he would emerge the victor. Sadly for him though, Bane was still cool at this point. So we got humiliated pretty bad. I'd never seen Batman lose to another human so easily, which has made this moment stick with me much longer than it should have. Anyway, it was a great way to shake up the audience and have them look forward to how the story would eventually unfold.
Let's end this.
In a surprising second entry from Black Adam, we see Dwayne Johnson ripping Sabak a final one. Bro was determined to make this fight resemble wrestling in some way, and even though shredding your opponent's body in half isn't how WWE does it, the final blow did give me some serious wrestling ring energy for some reason. All of this happens only after an already intense battle, and for plot purposes, our hero gets a little assist from Hawkman, although
Tell him the man in black sent you.
I personally felt that it took away from Black Adam's aura. He shouldn't have to rely on someone else to help him take down his opponent, but whatever, the final shot was pretty epic, so I'm willing to ignore that detail, okay? Plus, Sabak is a pretty tough character, so I'm assuming they didn't want him to get beaten so easily. Listen, Old Boy is peak, but this too is a great way to use the hallway, especially if you like to be dark with your eyeliner and life choices. You know, Batman seems to be a whole lot more in his element when he's operating by himself, because this allows him to tap into his true nature. He's a massive global brand for sure, but when it comes to scale, I'd much rather have him spooking out guys in the shadows and then taking them down as they desperately try to shoot him. Bro had all the confidence in the world because he had some crazy armor on him, and he also utilized the darkness to create a sense of panic and anxiety for these dudes who should only be referred to as Batman's victims. Yeah, if you thought the Michael Keaton entry was devoid of light, this scene makes it look like a freaking morning on the beach. I loved how the desperation to kill Batman continued to grow, but he still pummeled them all the way to the ground. Visibility might be an issue here, but that's actually what makes the whole sequence work in the first place.
He has to pay!
You don't have to pay with them. Till the gods make known their will.
Say what you will about Aquaman, but you can't deny the fact that we all got a stunning display for the finale. Arthur Curry had already farmed tons of aura when he showed up with that absolute beast Carathan, but I suppose Hollywood is all about excess, isn't it? The fight between Aquaman and the Ocean Master wasn't all that dramatic. The emotional background to the fight was what sold the scene. After all, they share the same father, so it was definitely a family squabble. What I also liked about the scene was that Arthur chose to spare his bro, which is the ultimate flex, as long as the villain doesn't try to sneak attack at the last minute. You know, it's really funny that the first movie mainly succeeded because of the ladies loving Jason Momoa, because if you've seen Entourage, you'll know that Vince's folks were also counting on the ladies swarming in to see him as Aquaman. It's not every day that you get to see Superman violating his own buddies, but since we're kicking off the top 10, we've got Kal-El completely dominating the rest of the Justice League. Honestly speaking, this movie was Joss Whedon's way of telling us that he believes Superman is the most powerful hero in the DC universe. Anyway, his resurrection didn't go exactly as planned, because bro immediately turned to the dark side and used the power of his own force to show us who's the boss. Freaking Wonder Woman, Cyborg, Aquaman, and The Flash all tried their best by using their powers to keep the Man of Steel at bay, but simply saying a sentence like that is considered ridiculous. And all things considered, Batman really got the worst treatment out of all of the Justice League squad members in terms of humiliation. I suppose Whedon didn't like the movie that's going to get covered in the next entry. Yeah bro, something really is bleeding, and it's your aura bag. Well, it may not have completely lived up to its hype, but this is still the big fight of the DCEU, and it's good enough to land at number 9. Seeing Batman facing off against Superman in a big budget film is something special. Zack Snyder did add a lot of style to the sequence too, and we get to see a lot of back and forth between the two characters, which should be ridiculous considering one dude's a guy in a bat costume and the other dude is as strong as a god. Wait, that's actually a bit unfair because I didn't consider Bruce Wayne's true secret power, his bank account. The deciding factor was always going to be Kryptonite, where there were some great moments in between two that made the scene very much enjoyable for DC lovers. Having said that, I'll stick to my opinion that they could have done a much better job than what they showed us in the final cut. It's not easy beating a giant starfish. I mean, that's a statement I never thought I'd say until 2021's The Suicide Squad came out. Like, the most dangerous echinoderm in my head used to be Starmie, but all of that changed after the world got introduced to Starro. That dude may have had a tragic existence, but the final battle of this film was a heck of a thing to watch. You can always leave it to James Gunn to amaze his audience with absurdities, but for some reason, they do happen to work out, don't they? In this encounter, we begin with the whole hive mind revelation, and then it's a whole bunch of chaos till the day saved by an army of rats. As someone who isn't a fan of rodents, you could say that I would have preferred any other alternative, but when all said and done, Ratcatcher 2 did a good job. Yeah, Idris Elba's Bloodsport was literally me. Anyway, I also want to shout out good old Margot Robbie for giving us another badass Harley Quinn moment.
I was happy, floating, staring at the stars.
This was an iconic battle for the Caped Crusader, so it only makes sense for it to be presented here at number 7. The alley fight did start off with Batman being the dude in trouble, but I suppose this was all just an elaborate setup for him to kick some butt and have his pictures taken as well. It's an over-the-top sequence for sure, which kind of suits Tim Burton's gothic vibe, and I do prefer Batman being a street vigilante than going large scale with other superheroes. It's just like I said in the Robert Pattinson entry too. Bro's the best when he goes solo. In this particular sequence, I really like how Bruce Wayne just calmly stands there all still and quiet while the swordsman tries to attack him with loud and vicious noises. Of course, this was once again just a setup for Batman to kick his face in like it was nothing. It's like the Indiana Jones scene, but without the gun. It's kind of funny that this battle trumped the main selling point of Batman vs Superman. Of course, you've already seen that entry on the list, but the Doomsday fight was just something else. I feel they still could have done a much better job with his character design, but I won't read too much into that because we got to see some striking visuals and a great entrance from Wonder Woman 2. Yeah, we might like to make fun of Gal Gadot's acting skills, but you'd be lying if you said that this particular moment didn't get you hyped AF. There are other highlights too, like Superman and Doomsday's first round, or Superman and Doomsday's laser beam contest, or maybe Superman ending it with that Kryptonian spear. Man, I really want to say something nice about Batman here, but bro was just evading death and barely managing to stay alive. No shade though, it's a super flex to say that you fought against Doomsday and lived to tell the tale. I really want to say this battle was a true team effort, but in reality, basically Superman saving the honor of the Justice League. Like, Steppenwolf was having the time of his life right until Kal-El decided to show up in his black suit and pull a full Uno reverse on the supposedly big baddie from this movie. To make it fair, I'll include the parts where the League fights off Steppenwolf and his army before the Man of Steel shows up to save them all. Bro was farming so much aura. The Zack Snyder had to include Flash in his whole Speed Force rescue sequence just to make sure Kal-El wasn't looking too dominant as compared to his other minions. Yeah, I mean, that's just my theory. But if you think about it, it's a rather believable one, isn't it? Spare a thought for Steppenwolf too. This dude quite literally became the perfect example of that final boss character before versus after you unlock him in a video game.
No, impressed. They do not deserve your protection!
It truly is a delight to see the princess slaying the god of war. Don't worry, there's no way anyone's taking down our boy Kratos. I'm talking about how Wonder Woman phenomenally violated Ares in an elongated fight sequence that has both style and substance. While it does start off with Ares playing around with Diana.
Yes, Diana. Take them all.
She eventually manages to gain the upper hand and turn the tables against her opponent. Yeah, it did take massive heartbreak in the form of Steve's sacrifice, but hey, as long as Chris Pine was unharmed, it was worth the trade-off if you ask me. Zack Snyder really doesn't get enough credit for this movie because he was in the team that formed the story for it. If you want to say that I'm trying to take away credit from Patty Jenkins, just remember that she wrote and directed Wonder Woman 1984. My imaginary mic drop notwithstanding. I will say that she did direct this battle quite well because it's one of the core highlights of an extinct DCEU.
After bad. It's a joke. It's all a joke.
Hey look, it's one of those moments where the comedian becomes the joke, although in this case, it's super violent and out of left field. Sure, nobody's gonna feel bad about the comedian meeting such a brutal end, but just look at the fight. This dude is supposed to be an expert in combat, but he got owned and dominated without even getting a chance to do any real damage. I think he only got one legit strike, but throughout the rest of the scene, bro's getting whacked. Ozymandias really spared no time at all and coldly ended the comedian's life to kick off a highly underappreciated film. The background music was a brilliant idea, as it gives the audience so much to work with right off the bat. Man, Jeffrey Dean Morgan should really try to do more wholesome roles, but I suppose being purposefully immoral suits his vibe. After all, this is the same dude that played Negan from The Walking Dead. if there's anything we learn from this video, it's that Batman sure seems to have a thing for warehouses or any kind of dark, shady areas. After Michael Keaton and Robert Pattinson did their thing, we now see Ben Affleck flexing that huge frame of his in a relentless takedown of multiple henchmen. Well, it's actually a bit difficult to call those blokes henchmen because they were the ones who look like the victims here actually. I mean, just look at the domination here. Batfleck had all of them in a state of frenzy, but to be fair, he also had the Martha trigger activated in his brain. Yeah, we all know what happens to Bruce whenever his mommy issues arise, but hey, don't let that take anything away from how badass Batman is here. Honestly, I feel those dudes would have been safer if Superman was the one beating them up. Bro was so full of rage, and it definitely didn't look like he was in the mood for any kind of mercy.
Never.
Is there really a better entry to top this list than the final battle between the two boss Kryptonians? Supergirl may not have been able to get the job done, but Kal-El did, although his method rivaled Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. Yeah, he may be the strongest superhero on Earth, but when you're up against General Zod, you need to be at your absolute best unless you want to get violated in front of a live audience. The grand finale in Man of Steel gave us a gripping display that may have been heavily enhanced through CGI and all kinds of other visual effects, but that shouldn't take anything away from the tone of the battle and the implications of its outcome. Yes, we're all used to seeing buildings getting smashed and laser eyes being on full display during such fights. Tell me something very honestly, okay? How many Superman fights did you go into expecting our boy to snap his enemy's neck and take his freaking life? That's right, while the actual fight was surely top notch, the reason this stands out is because of this highly poignant decision by Clark Kent, which still lies somewhere within moral ambiguity in fan discussions.
You can mourn for them. Don't do this!
Hope you liked the video. Please subscribe to the TV Regent, and here's another video that I know you're going to enjoy.